Welcome to the Field Dynamics podcast. We're here to facilitate inspiring dialogues about the nature of consciousness across disciplines, communities, and practitioners, all with a holistic perspective.
From energy healing to somatic therapies, from neuroscience to meditation, we believe the most interesting things happen at the boundaries of disciplines.
I'm Christabel.
And I'm Keith.
Thanks for joining us today and enjoy the episode.
Hello, and welcome to the Field Dynamics podcast. Today, we are joined by Saul Goodman. Saul is an author, teacher, and developer of Shin Tai and the founder of the International School of Shiatsu, with branches in over 15 countries. He's author of the Book of Shiatsu, Shiatsu Shin Tai, and Light Body Activation. Shin Tai methodology emerged from Saul's years of working with the body and discovering the relationship between it and the flow of energy, offering a unique set of diagnostics and techniques to activate the client's own inner life force. His book, Light Body Activation, describes the vibrational shifts taking place in our current stage of evolution and features practices for integrating and synchronizing our life with these vibrational, multidimensional influences. Saul has taught classes for almost 40 years, with 30 instructors now teaching Shin Tai in the US and Europe, and thousands of practitioners around the world. Currently, he runs his private practice alongside his wife, Lynn, in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Firstly, Saul, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
It's really my pleasure to be here.
I guess a really good first question is, would you mind breaking down the word Shin Tai, what it means and how it informs the system of healing you've developed?
Just the word itself, Shin Tai. Tai means body, and it's used together with a lot of prefixes. Like Gentai is earth body, Yutai, astral body, Reitai is radiation body. So Shin Tai means source body. I mean, a lot of times it's translated as God, but I just thought that because of some of the, connections to that particular word that I would use source body.
Might you share some of your personal journey, Saul, about how you came to Shiatsu and how things have developed from there?
Well, I was a full-time musician and played in nightclubs for quite a few years. And it was a pretty interesting lifestyle, working from 9 o'clock at night to 2, 3 in the morning, sometimes from 12 at night till 5 in the morning, depending on where we were. And even though I tried to follow a healthy diet at the time, I got pretty run down. I also was exposed to lead paint and got lead poisoning. So it was a long journey to get my energy back, to get my health back after that. And one day I just happened into a store that sold natural foods in Philadelphia, and there was a sign on the wall that said Shiatsu. And it really just rang a bell. That's all I had already practiced yoga and studied with Amrit Desai. And then I had also done some macrobiotic cooking to transform over to a natural-based diet. So I walked into this health food store and there was a sign that said Shiatsu. I thought, well, that sounds something interesting for me. I went to a few classes, I learned a few techniques, and after that, probably none of the musicians that I was working with were safe because I wanted to practice on everyone. I was just so curious about how it worked, and the thing that really interested me, and I still remember that moment, there was like one of those special moments that really flash in your mind. It was a little blurb on the Shiatsu poster that talked about energy flowing through the body. And right there, I thought, I want to see that. I want to know how that works. So that set me off on a very long and interesting journey with a lot of experiences. And I'm very grateful for it because it was just a life unfolded that I could not have imagined when I was a child and even as a young adult. And then it just unfolded in front of me, and there I was practicing Shiatsu. People started to ask me to teach. I had no intention to be a teacher, and would work on some of the people around me. And then a group of people said, "Can you show us?" I thought, well, okay, I'll try. And then from there, the teaching aspect of it began, and through how would you say, synchronistic set of circumstances, I got invited to teach in London. And from London, got invited to start a school in Switzerland, and that school became the nerve center of these different branches of the International School of Shiatsu. In the meantime, practicing, because it was a passion of mine, to find out how body work works, how Shiatsu works. And so I started to find things on my own by doing treatment after treatment and observing, because I think it's easy to observe when it's something you're interested in. And you look and you really see the details because you want to. And so I started to notice things that the body was saying to me. And so I developed some either techniques that seemed improvised at the time, and expanded on some of the traditional shiatsu techniques. And then I started to also have encounters with Western practitioners, osteopaths, and such. And the whole practice developed both on the physical, mechanical level, but then also went deeper and more expanded into the energetic level. And so then after a certain point, that had gotten so broad that I decided to give it this title, Shin Tai. And that's how I arrived at that place, having a practice and a body of work that had kind of evolved to something that was more personalized, and I called it Shin Tai.
I'm intrigued, Saul, if there was a seminal experience, as it were, in that journey you've just outlined. You mentioned the call to action on the poster, right? This idea of being able to feel or see the flow of energy in the body. Was there a moment that stands out, or an experience where you first made that connection for yourself?
Well, in that flash moment, I did have an image, and it wasn't a static image. It was a image of a body and like active flowing of electromagnetic currents through that body. And it included some type of colorations to it. And it just appeared with that flash moment. And then the story about how that took a quantum leap is a little bit, I don't know, unless you were there when it happened, it might sound a little bit unusual or fantastic. But it was great. And it then opened up a lot of doors. And I, had read also books about the aura, clairvoyance, and things like that. And I was very curious about it. And I think that I developed, I would say, conceptual ideas of what it is that I would see when I would be able to view that part of the system. But when it actually occurred, it was like quite different than what I thought. I was doing a class in Germany, in Hamburg, Germany, and there was quite a few people there. And one of the things, as you may know, and some of the people know, during releases, the person will stop breathing, either on the in-breath or out-breath. And this person did stop breathing. I thought it was fine, but then they did not start breathing. And I could tell that the group was getting a little nervous. I had a friend that was a breath worker. Later on, I told her about it, how long they stopped breathing. And she said, oh, that's nothing. That happens all the time. So I felt better in retrospect. But while it was happening, I have to admit that at a certain point, I started also to be, well, how should I let this go or just kind of shake the person out of it? But anyway, she came finally back and was breathing again. And I think everyone else had stopped breathing. In the meantime, they started breathing again. And I was just watching around, because there's this moment with the group, when you're teaching a group, kind of reaches an entrainment of frequency. And it feels like you're kind of lifting out of the room. The space-time has just moved to the continuum. And that feeling was there, very present time. This is the strange part. I was sitting there, and floating over her body in holographic full color was Mickey Mouse. And so there's 30 people around taking a bodywork class, mostly around soft tissue release and joint manipulation. And here I am looking over this person that had just this kind of release. And there's floating around this huge Mickey Mouse. And I thought, no, what's happening? It was just hanging there. And it looked like a big balloon in a New Year's parade. When she sat up, I just couldn't help it. I guess it was like one of those things where you're kind of there's an intervention from somewhere else. And I just blurted out at her. I said, what's with Mickey Mouse? The woman did not miss a beat. And she went right into the story. about how when she was about 11 or 12 years old, her father decided that she was not growing up fast enough. She was sent off to a boarding school. And the thing that she missed most was her big collection of stuffed animals. And the main one that she missed most of all was the stuffed Mickey Mouse. After that, when I was working with people and they kind of reached that entrainment frequency, I've kind of outlined that as 3 phases of motion that occur to the body as it recovers its life force. The late second and third phase of this motion in the body, that's when there'll be release of stress forces in the system. And those stress forces have internalized all the information that was there at the time of the stress. So full color, images, sounds, and even smell. We've had smell coming out of the body that was not in the room, not around the building, and it was from another time period that had gotten fused into the stress that had been internalized. Anyway, now that I kind of had the connection to those wavelengths, I started to see these pictures quite often when I was treating people. I can't say it was absolutely always accurate, but it was pretty high percentage that the image was always associated with a major stress period of their life. And when the body had internalized all that imagery and all that trauma, in order to do that, it uses life force, which gets then trapped in the fascial stress system. So in reverse, when you release it, all that information comes unfolding out. But instead of being held in a form or in formation, it now becomes free form, flowing back into present time where the person can then utilize it for what it is that they're trying to move forward with.
It's interesting you mentioned this in terms of pictures, using this specific word too, because we recently had a talk with John Friedlander, and his primary technique is called blowing up pictures, or one of the main techniques they teach, which is finding pictures that encapsulate the stresses within the system, and then taking those pictures once identified and blowing them up or exploding them, i.e. finding a release technique for them. So I find that really fascinating. What are the core techniques of Shin Tai? How would you describe the approach in general, or maybe hierarchically, how you do treatment emphasis?
Well, it does have this strong connection to Shiatsu. Sometimes I could use that as a reference point. But the main thing with Shin Tai was discovering the priority of treatment. And from there, looking at the body layers as types of information systems that, of course, should interact when there's well-being, but stop communicating with each other when there's a misalignment or a lack of well-being, sickness. So things that I was working with in Shiatsu, that after a treatment, the person felt better, looked better, but then it didn't change over the long run, really change on a deep level. So I work with techniques of structural alignment that were flowing together with Shiatsu. Muscle energy technique is one that I borrowed a lot from. And with that, some of these structural anomalies that didn't change through just the standard basic Shiatsu technique, I could then get a much better shift at that level. I was first defining it in my mind from yin to yang, yang being the more denser level of the body. Through the yin part would be more like the vibrational body. And then when working with different clients, trying to understand what level of information are they most likely to communicate with, whether it's directly or subliminally. And then giving the treatment, finding where is that level of information that can receive something about what's happening, and then working there. So it could be fascia, could be meridian, it could be the structural work, or it could be off the body. But I was trying to find different ways to evaluate how the body lets you know where the priority is. And so, that was a quest and a journey and a very interesting path that I was on.
Love this idea, Saul, this core principle or question of how does the body let you know where the information is? And this fluctuation between tissue, body, soma, up to the outer body, the bioplasmic outer body, as I think you refer to the human energy field or aura. So we have this energy field that surrounds and permeates the physical body, and we work with this ourselves in field dynamics with the energy healing. You've said that this outer body or field acts as a filter or interpretive device for all incoming information. So I'd love to hear how you'd voice how this impacts people's lived experience, their day-to-day life, as well as the sort of in the healing context, or however you'd like to present that.
The bioplasmic body, the way I experience it, is like a vibrational membrane that has all the qualities of like a cellular membrane. It's like to me, it's the evolutionary extension of the cellular membrane. So it has semi-permeability, it has selective permeability. Most people are having that permeability adjusted at an unconscious level, according to their emotional conditioning and their belief conditioning. They will contract against things that challenge that belief system, a wounded part of their emotional system. The membrane selectively will shut down. So sometimes people, you might have the experience where you're talking to someone and you're thinking what you're saying to them is just bouncing off. And energetically, that's true, because their membrane has become maybe permanently so dense that they can't change anything about their paradigm of thought perception. And so the first thing that in the development journey is the person that you're working with or speaking with. Even the family members have like a whole variety of different places in their journey. And some can be very open to, more expanded ideas, and others, it just doesn't compute at all. You learn over time with a family member or even a client that you can't approach them at that more expanded frequency. You have to be able to speak with them at the level where their information system is open. And I think that all practitioners have made that mistake of, trying to communicate with the client at a frequency that they can't accept, or even threatens this density or permeability of their outer body, their bioplasmic body. So that's a very interesting thing for me to, work with and observe, and trying just to discover the compatible level of exchanging information, whatever that is. And then when giving treatments, and back to this idea of priority of treatment, understanding as the person goes through transformation of permeability, because as you mentioned, the bioplasmic field permeates deeply into the physical body. And so when the outer body part outside the skin layer becomes more permeable, also the inner part can become more permeable. And as that happens, there are these 3 phases of motion that the person's body will go through. And as those phases of motion unfold, it indicates to you that the body will now accept different type of input or stimulation. Whereas in the first phase, where the body's more dense, or even before the body has reacted at all, you might need to give more manual or more mechanical input. But as they become more permeable, more receptive, you can use very minimal amounts of stimulation, what in our work we call the critical point of tension. At that critical point of tension, the person has usually the most reaction. Even if you would do something more forceful, it would actually shut the person down at that point in the treatment. Whereas like to something very minimal can accelerate the process that they're in.
In the Shin Tai approach, there's a real emphasis in the central channel, the GV and the CV. These channels are structures that are most core or centralized in the person's body and field. So I'm wondering if you could just talk about that a little bit, how that's an emphasis in Shin Tai, and in particular, how does that then connect to chakras? Because you do incorporate chakras in Shin Tai, and a lot of people have different opinions or perspectives on how to think of connecting the meridians and the chakra system.
The governing vessel, conception vessel, the 2 meridians, that one goes up the front, conception vessel, governing vessel goes up the back. And it's interesting that one's yin and one's yang, but they're both going upward. But they also go into the body and both go downward. And in the end, they're actually a circuit of energy, almost like a figure 8. motion. So the governing vessel, conception vessel are one primal energy field, but we're just really calling them different things, but they're actually looping together. What I started to notice, and it had to do with the birth of this 3 phases of motion, that the most primitive level of life force, the primitive expression is motion. And then that the governing vessel and conception vessel were motion in the original cell. So that's a little abstract, but that's how I see it. And so when you talk about governing vessel, conception vessel, the 2 acupuncture meridians, which like the teacher Masanaga said, that the governing vessel, conception vessel stand above all the other meridians in terms of importance, which was an interesting thing for him to say, being that there's no diagnosis for it really in terms of the other meridians. There's no visual for the governing vessel, conception vessel. You know, the eyes, the face don't have governing vessel, conception vessel diagnostics. According to Masanaga and others, they are the 2 most important meridians. So I was wondering, well, how do you diagnose them? And then what I realized was that motion is meridian in the primitive cell. So that motion is also the primitive expression of governing vessel, conception vessel. It's like white light going through a prism over the time of evolution, that the governing vessel, conception vessel, compartmentalized, specialized to serve the communication within a higher organism. And so I started to look at how people move in response to the different things I was doing in the treatments. And then I started to notice that there was a sequence of movements that their body would recover as the body released stress forces. Going to the other part of the question, the chakras lie right on the center line. So you have governing vessel, conception vessel, which are actually the same flow of energies, which is a figure 8 type movement on the outside and inside through the center of the body. And that's exactly where the chakras are. So these 2 energy forces are intimately connected and reacting with each other. And it made me curious at a certain point then, how can you work with one without considering the other? Another example is the Chinese research shows that the meridian line, the electromagnetic current of a meridian, flows through the fascia. You know, how can we work with the balancing of meridians if we don't consider the conduit and the condition of that conduit, which is soft tissue? So you can be working with shiatsu, meridian style shiatsu, because there's different types of shiatsu that don't use meridians. But anyway, shiatsu style. And if you're working with an area that is either congested or deficient, how can you not consider the condition of the soft tissue, which is the part that's the conduit for it in and out of the body? So similar to that, the chakra, which I see that the central part of the chakra vibration is at the level of the etheric body. This is how I see it. And then it descends into the physical body through the meridian distribution. In the back, the chakra enters and affects the nerve plexus that's there. In the front, the connection of flowing through and affecting the hormonal system. And so the translation of the chakra into the body has a lot to do also with the soft tissue, but also with the flow of the governing vessel. And you can see the governing vessel condition through the motion of the body. And we're not talking about gross motion, we're talking about micro movements that the body will start to make when it becomes free of stress forces. And you see a lot of that more with your peripheral vision.
For the purpose of a listener, to try and help sort of solidify this into an experience, because a lot of this is very experiential to the practitioner through extrasensory subtle perception. So, well, first of all, what is it that somebody might come to you with in terms of a therapeutic question? If they have an issue to work through, and how is it that you go about? I'm trying to sort of almost walk someone through the experience a little. How is it that you might go about intaking somebody and working with their system if they come in with let's say an emotional issue as opposed to a physical one?
One of the things we already covered was I really want to understand where their information exchange is. Is it more linear? Is it more abstract? Is it based in past time, future time? And those things I think that you pick up pretty quick so I can relate to them. And then when I work with the body, I start by looking for these stress forces. And I've got a toolbox of techniques that I use to release those stress forces and different ways to evaluate them. There's different groupings of them. One grouping, you see a certain kind of stress force that would indicate that the person is trapped in the past. Now, that's a very generalized thing. But then there's another set of stress indications that will show that the person tends to be projected into the future. Another set that might show that the person really got trapped somehow in their journey through puberty. And that's a common one. Another one that shows that they're tied up in their belief system. And so they're pretty reliable. I can't say that they're absolute, but they're reliable that when you see certain patterns of the stress forces, it's going to be that they're tied up in their belief system. And that's in the moment, the priority of what's trapping them. Now, once you start to clear that layer, who knows what's going to pop up from underneath? It could be the puberty actor jumping up and saying, okay, it's my turn now to unravel this entrapment. And then it's not just so linear like that, it's more like unraveling a ball of wool that got all tied up. But together with the imagery that comes up, which is oftentimes a really surprisingly accurate confirmation because they remember it. Occasionally they don't, but then a week later they come back and say, oh, I did remember, because it was so painful that they buried it and didn't want to remember. When the stress forces start to release, the information also releases. So it starts to surface again more at the conscious level. And it's really surprising what people have forgotten, including tragic deaths of siblings and children. More generalized are these recovery of the motion. When you see the person starting to move in a certain way, micro movements coming back into the body, you know that not only are they disengaging from these entrapments of past and future, but that the life force that was trapped in these systems of past and future now are released, and you can feel it flowing back into present time. And that expands the frequency and this sensation that we get in the treatment room of no time. It's like one of those sessions where you work for maybe an hour, but it felt like 5 minutes.
Stepping back from tools and techniques, to quote you from your book, you say, for an awakening human, full participation in the life they already have becomes the healing ritual. Could you comment further on this broader kind of macro perspective?
A lot of times people are so much wanting to get somewhere else other than where they are now. And if they could zoom out, they would see that their life is a ritual, regardless of how they're interpreting it, or good, bad, whatever. They are going through ritualistic movements. And the more they become aware of that and participate in it, it liberates the movement into transformations of what is in the present. So the thing that they're trying to get away from may be the doorway actually to go to where they want to be, if they embrace it and they fully participate in it. It's like the present is like a unsculpted ball of clay. And once we say, okay, I can use this clay, let me form it, let me shape it. You're working with the thing that's there and you're transforming it into something. So I think all of the ingredients, all of the life force, all the potency that you need to transform your reality is present within the things that are your life in that moment. If you're saying, well, I like this, I don't like that, you're in denial of a part of yourself. It's like working with that whole thing and participating, engaging in the full spectrum of what has come to you in life is the thing that transforms to create whatever it is that you may be desiring to move toward. And in that engagement and in that present time involvement, your values may change. And so you also may realize that not only do you already have a lot of what you thought you were wanting to have and didn't have, but also like where you want to go may also shift. Definitions shift. What's the definition of healthy? What's the definition of love? What's the definition of a lot of things? You change your definitions. Entertainment, like what it means to be entertained, that has like a definition for the general population. But as you transform and become more present, you realize that even entertainment can be a spiritual event, or a spiritual event can be a form of entertainment.
To touch on a primary subject of your work, what is light body activation? Would you let people know what you mean by that? You wrote a whole book on it. Yeah.
So we actually already talked about a lot through our conversation, that we are in a process of changing, and it seems like it's accelerating right now. The physical body, it's like a reversal of what happened. We were in the womb, but now the womb is outside of us. And this energetic matrix, which some people call it the aura, or I was saying bioplasmic body, it's a system. It's a system in the body, like the digestive system that we've manifested, but more externally. And our vibrational center is moving from the physical point into this more vibrational point. And so this is something that I kind of refer to as spiritual birth, and the movement that we may be having as we went from the womb, which was a water environment that we inhabited for, which probably seemed to be a long time at the time, wherever our perception was of that. And we went from water to an air environment that was, 9 months. Time now is like a different relationship with this process, where we're going from the physical three-dimensional plane, and we're developing a body that then is going to function in a vibrational plane. At a certain point, we'll absorb the physical body, because the cells and the tissue is, nothing but really vibration condensed. So it can uncondense and become part of this vibrational body. And the fully manifested vibrational body is the light body. And a lot of us are in stages in between the physical and the light body. As we develop further with the awakening to this fact that we have this light body and that we can regulate it, and that by regulating it, evolution becomes interactive, whereas before it was kind of automatic, unconscious. Now it's becoming kind of interactive evolution as we are creating the light body. And that part of what fuels the light body are the chakras. They become like fuel centers, and also the kundalini channels. It's like maybe more the chakras are more like the engine, and the fuel that fuels those engines is more like the kundalini. And if you look at it a certain way, the physical body is like the cell nucleus, and the vibrational part is more like the outer part, or the cytoplasm with a membrane. And that the kundalini channels are a replication at a higher level of the DNA. And so they have that information, like the DNA has all this genetic information, that the kundalini, as that extension of the DNA, has all of this bioplasmic genetic information of how and what a non-linear, non-time universe for us will look like as we transform from this dimension to the one we're slowly moving into.
Really powerful verbalization of a future of wellness, effectively. This idea of the wellness world, technology, the medical industries. Maybe there's this future whereby, field dynamics is certainly intending for this. People and the industry of wellness are optimizing and working towards developing, regulating, as you said, this human energy body. I wonder from that perspective, there's this conscious methodology we can have of working with the chakras, working with the kundalini, perhaps working with the central channel, various healing modalities whereby we are awakening, regulating, coming more and more into conscious connection with our energy field. How much conscious development of this is helpful or required versus a more subconscious or unconscious development of the energy body? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I think that the subconscious has been guiding the process, forever, except in a few special individuals over time. And I think now that human beings have reached a certain point, like Homo sapien is ready to transform. And so we are developing like new skills, new capacities, like a baby doesn't know how to even grip its hand to pick something up. And we're kind of at that stage in the light body world, in the light body dimension. We have these faculties, like the faculties of clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, and the ability to travel, how we can project ourselves for traveling. And so this is the transition point where we become aware of that. And we realize that we can regulate it, that we must regulate it. Because in the transition, and if we look at it like zooming out, in terms of time, when large movements of transformation take place, there are uncomfortable periods for people where they suffer because they can't integrate what's happening to them with what's the normalcy around them. And we do meet people that just can't, that have had something, and I think it's a misnomer, but we people know it as kundalini syndrome, where the kundalini or the energy has exploded and the frequency has expanded beyond the conceptual mind, and the person is getting a lot of non-conceptual information that they can't put into any framework, and they can't relate them to people around them, to the family. And I've had clients, that had that experience, and some we successfully could move them through, and some not. It's paradoxical, it's going to come naturally that we learn this, and we must also consciously seek it out if we want to be harmonized with ever-changing reality of not only this plane, which is extremely challenging right now, but also where a lot of us are functioning, whether we consciously know it or not, and to what degree we know it or not. We're spending a lot of time not in the actual constraints of this physical plane. There's a front and back to that because it's a very interesting experience, but it opens you up to things that you may not be aware of that could become uncomfortable. And there's a whole gamut of possibilities from, psychic intrusion to more sensitivity, even to different kinds of viruses, bacterias. I've seen people that they have become so much in the energy body that the physical body, the immune system wasn't functioning very well. And the doctors couldn't say exactly what it was. And that's a sign that that's what it is. They've gone to this doctor, this specialist, this one, and it could be this, it could be that, we don't know. That's a sign that it's this expanding energy field, physical field, and that the frequencies are shifting, but the person's not regulating them. Like if you go into a crowded shopping mall, it can be very helpful to know how to make yourself a little bit more dense, to create a little bit more density and less permeability in your vibrational body. If not, you can, walk out of that mall and be seeing things that were going on and feeling things for weeks. And it's not fun, unless it was like humorous or something. These are things that some of us have learned through the experience of having that happen. But there are techniques, as people use different techniques. They might call it psychic protection. In my work, I do a lot of things with not only us more permeable to receive more higher frequencies of information, but also how can we make ourselves less permeable? We all grew up in this era where like, well, let's be open. But sometimes it's okay to want to be a little bit more closed, and it's necessary. Just like putting your hand on a hot stove. It's like, it's good to know the difference there. Yeah, this idea of regulating, it's a paradox. It's happening naturally anyway. We're moving into this new phase, this new frequency range of reality. It's just like evolution has happened, for all these billions of years. And now we're in this process of it. And in order for us to, as humans, and the uniqueness of us as humans, to be able to regulate it like we would stop and look both ways at the street crossing, and to notice like what's the vibrational content of the situation we're in. I'm also learning how to harmonize different situations. Like with the chakras, there are specific use cases with chakra work. There's a fundamental level of synchronizing, balancing the whole system, but then specific use cases that you can use for different physical problems, for emotional problems, for relationship problems. They're awesome for relationship problems, to harmonize with the people close, far, past, present. We all have like friction with our environment, with the human environment, and we can reduce that greatly by adjusting the flow of energy through various chakras. We can also, it's very powerful for adjusting the hormonal system, on and on. I can go on and on because that's really the focus of my work right now. And yeah, I could talk another hour about that. I enjoy it, and it's very potent. And I learned some of it. I stumbled into some of it. I'm very grateful that it's come my way.
It's really helpful to hear you talk about this in a really grounded manner. As you said, there's a lot of terms floating around, psychic protection, psychic attack, etc. And I'm not taking away from those ideas at all, but just bringing it into everyday common parlance of understanding. It's regulating and harmonizing, reacting to informational content in the reality. Just like, as you said, learning to look both ways when you cross the street, making it very matter of fact, very practical. That this is a skill set we can employ in the energetic sense, just as we employ skill sets in the physical sense.
So as we're kind of wrapping things up, we like to always ask, what are you working on now? Like what are the next steps for you in terms of your interests and passions? You just mentioned that you're doing a lot of chakra regulation work, if I understood you correctly, but what's going on with you there?
I find that in the healing scene and the natural lifestyle scene, everybody has at least 4 or 5 books about chakras. And if you read them, which I have not done extensively, but there's a lot of conflicting information. It can be just barely conflicting, but it's enough to short circuit sometimes. And so I wanted to learn what the chakras do, and even the location, anatomical versus vibrational, which I think is a very important upcoming understanding that we may have, how to locate the chakra. The anatomical indication usually is a starting point, but it's not a definitive idea. Anyway, so working with that idea, and then how to understand, to know when are you connected, mind and intention with the chakra. There are indications, experience that you have when you're in the program. It's up on the screen, and from there you can see, is that chakra wobbling? Is it restricted? Is the front and the back part of that chakra out of sync? And then resynchronize, create more symmetrical flow. And also, well, which direction does it go in? And there's one of the subjects of, I think, a lot of difference. The answer for me is it goes in the direction it's going. And then you can work with that in terms of understanding, is it too fast, too slow? And it starts with knowing for sure that you're connected to it, not visualizing it or imagining it, but there's a direct connection. And from there, then you can do this basic synchronizing. So I'm really very enthusiastic about that. And I do that work a lot myself. And the results of it, for me and a few of the others that I've talked to, it's very rewarding, very profound. And then developing it further, as I mentioned before, to specific use cases. Like if there's friction in a business relationship, in a spousal relationship, how to reduce the friction by harmonizing the frequency of conflicting energies, which the chakras are a very good entry point for that. So that's what I'm going to come out with next as a online module. Lynn and I produced a whole series of Shin Tai learning modules and also light body activation modules. The last thing that we did was called the chakra workout. And complementary to that, what we're going to be doing in our next class is this cranial suture, self-adjustment of the cranial sutures and the vertebrae. But then that also means that it's an adjustment of the cerebral spinal fluid and the nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system. And it's complementary. It's a very interesting piece of the puzzle working with chakras. And then how that is part of the light body configuration. The chakras are an essential part. Probably down the road, I'm going to articulate a lot more ideas that I have about the kundalini fields and how to work with them safely and how you can step by step go into the process, because ultimately they're all interacting. And that as we reach higher levels of, well, we'll say consciousness, they become more synergistic. Whereas at a lower level, they're interacting, they're exchanging, but they start to function more as one entity as we grow and mature more into the light body stage. So that's where my passion is. And I'm also writing songs, and I love doing that. And I'm having a lot of fun writing music right now. Lynn plays the fiddle and I play the guitar. So we go around and busk down at the boardwalk, and it's a blast.
It's fantastic to hear more about your current offerings. So I know that many of our listeners may be interested. I'd like to direct them to your website, shintaiinternational.com, for more information. We'll make sure that's included in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time today. I know, as you mentioned, we could talk for many more hours than just this one. And it's been a real pleasure to hear your wisdom and all your accrued knowledge.
Yeah, thank you so much, Saul. Really appreciate your time today. Great to connect.
It's been a really pleasant experience to have this dialogue. And I look forward to talking to you again sometime.
Thanks for listening to the episode. What really supports the podcast is providing a rating and review of the show on your preferred listening platform. This helps us get the message out to a wider audience. If the topics we discussed today appeal to you, do take a moment to subscribe. Lastly, we invite you to check out our website, fielddynamicshealing.com, to learn about our training programs, private session work, and to see how we're setting the standard in contemporary energy healing. Many thanks, and see you next time.